the sniper who had one bullet to save his pilot, I've told this story 100 times. I've never told it right. This is the Debrief files. Real missions, real soldiers, the stories that never made it into the official report until now. Somewhere in a drawer in my house, there's a commendation with my name on it. It's for something I did with the last round I had left in my rifle, one night in a valley in Helmand province. Officially, it says I saved a pilot's life. That part is true. I've never once doubted that part. What it doesn't say, what no official document was ever going to say, is the other thing that same round did in that same half second. And the question I've been sitting with for 4 years about whether I read that half second right. I'll get to that part. But it doesn't mean anything unless you understand how a man ends up with exactly one round in his rifle at the exact moment he needs one to be enough. So let me start there. My name doesn't matter for this one. What matters is the job, and the night it stopped being simple. I was a designated marksman with a Ranger reconnaissance element, working out of a forward operating base in Helmand. 2011. If you've never been in that part of Afghanistan, picture a valley cut by a dry riverbed, walls of rock on either side, steep enough that helicopters had to thread the approach like they were parking a truck in an alley. No moon that night. In a valley like that, with no moon, the dark has weight to it. It sits on your chest. We'd gone in 6 hours earlier to confirm a compound. A suspected weapons cache, a mid-level facilitator, the kind of target that's supposed to take 90 minutes and a couple of photographs. It didn't go that way. The compound was hot, not an ambush exactly. We moved like ghosts, more like we'd put our boots down on something that had been building for weeks without anyone telling us. By the time the assault element finished clearing the structure, we had 3 wounded, one of them serious, and a perimeter getting probed from 2 sides at once. My job wasn't part of that assault. I was 600 meters out, up on a rock shelf on the eastern wall of the valley, with a clean line down onto the compound and the wadi running below it. Overwatch. You watch, you call things in. You wait and you trust that the waiting is doing something. My rifle was a bolt action, 300 Win Mag, 10 rounds in the magazine when the night started. Hold on to that number. It's going to matter more than anything else in this story. For the first 4 hours, Overwatch was quiet work. The kind of quiet where your mind starts drifting toward home, even while your eye stays locked on the scope. Somewhere around hour 5, the quiet ended, because that's when fighters started using the wadi as a covered approach, moving to flank the compound from the north. And that's when I started spending rounds to stop them, one confirmed movement at a time, 10 becoming 9, becoming a number I was tracking without wanting to. By the time exfil was finally called, bird inbound, 40 minutes out, I had 1 round left in that rifle. 1. I remember the radio call from my team leader, flat and fast the way these calls always are. Birds coming in hot, LZ is the wadi mouth. We need eyes on anything that moves between the compound and that LZ. I remember thinking, almost calmly, that 1 round isn't eyes on anything. 1 round is 1 decision, made exactly once. And you had better be right, because there is no version of that night where you get to try again. The Black Hawk came in low, exactly the way you'd expect in that terrain. Nose down, hugging the valley floor instead of the ridge line, because the ridge line is where anyone with an RPG would be waiting for an easy shot. From my position, I had the whole approach laid out beneath me like a diagram. The compound, the wadi, the flat-packed dirt we were using as an LZ, and past that, the tree line that had been the source of most of our contact all night. The pilot brought that aircraft down, like he'd flown that exact stretch 100 times before. For a few seconds, it looked clean. Then muzzle flashes opened up from the tree line, off the aircraft's left flank, the side with no gun cover, because our door gunner was already firing right, at a separate group, trying to close on our ground element. That's the moment the math in my head changed. The pilot was exposed. My team was converging on the LZ with a wounded man strapped to a litter, and I had one round. I swung onto the tree line, found the muzzle flashes, and started building a firing solution. Wind, range, the aircraft's flight path. All of it happening in about 4 seconds, which is not a generous amount of time to be right about something irreversible. That's when I saw the second thing. Off to my right, maybe 800 meters out, right at the edge of what my scope could resolve in that light. A figure, moving fast. Not toward the wadi, not toward my team, toward the tree line, toward the exact position that was putting rounds into the side of my aircraft. Both arms up, something pale held out ahead of him, moving wrong for something. Just flapping loose in the wind, like he was trying to get someone's attention before it was too late to matter. I had maybe a second and a half to make sense of that. Smoke was drifting through the valley from the earlier contact. The light wasn't NVG dark, but it was bad enough that shapes blurred past 300 meters, and at 800 meters, through drifting smoke, you don't get clean detail on a face or a hand or the difference between a man raising a weapon and a man raising nothing at all. What I had was this: movement, converging fast on an active firing position, closing on the exact ground my pilot needed clear for the next 90 seconds of his life. I didn't have a second round to spend on being careful with the first one. I shifted off the muzzle flash and onto the figure because in that half second it read as the closer threat. Already something, not still becoming something. I fired. The figure went down. The muzzle flashes from the tree line stopped almost immediately after. Cause and effect, or coincidence, I never got to find out. And at 600 meters in the dark, I wasn't going to find out that night either. The pilot's exposed flank cleared. He set that aircraft down on the LZ, my team loaded the wounded man, and 40 seconds later the bird was airborne, and clearing the valley walls, nobody on that helicopter died that night. That's the fact I held on to for a long time, because it's the fact that matters most, and it's completely true. The after-action report was short and clean, the way these things usually are when nothing about them gets questioned. Hostile activity suppressed. Aircraft and personnel extracted without further casualties. My name was in there twice, once for the wadi, once for the tree line. 3 weeks later, I got a piece of paper and a handshake for it. My team leader told me I'd probably saved that pilot's life. For a long time, that was the whole story. I told it that way plenty of times. It was a good story. 4 years later, out of the Army, working a job that had nothing to do with any of this, I got a phone call from an old teammate about something that had surfaced during an unrelated detainee debrief. A translator working the file recognized the location and the date, cross-referenced it against our old after-action report out of curiosity more than anything, and called my teammate because he figured I'd want to know. The account, translated secondhand, through 2 people and 4 years of memory, described a local man that night who wasn't part of the group firing on our position. He'd been caught between our element and the fighters using the wadi, and according to that account, He'd been trying to get clear of both, moving toward what he thought was open ground, waving a strip of white cloth over his head the entire way. The closest thing he had to a signal that he wasn't a threat to anyone. I don't know if that account is complete. I don't know if it's accurate. 4 years, 2 languages, a translator with no reason to invent anything, but also no way to independently confirm anything either. What I do know is that nobody else on that ridge reported seeing that figure. Not my spotter. Not anyone on the ground element. I was the only set of eyes on that stretch of terrain, at that range, through that smoke, and I made a call in a second and a half that nobody else was in a position to check, then or now. The after-action report still says what it says. The commendation is still in that drawer. Neither one of those things is wrong, exactly. The pilot is alive. My team came home. Every fact in that report happened. But I've spent a long time since that phone call, sitting in the space between what the report says and what might have actually been in that man's hands. And I've come to understand something about that kind of decision that nobody tells you before you're the one making it. You don't get to make it twice. There's no version where you wait 1 more second for better light, or better range, or a cleaner read on what someone's carrying. You get 1 round, 1/2 second, and then you get to live with whichever version turns out to be true. Sometimes, without ever finding out which one it was. The commendation still hangs on my wall. The doubt still lives right next to it. Both of them are true. I'm the only one who has to hold both at once.